One thing that I find really frustrating is that on this podcast circuit, and to a certain extent, we're all guilty of it, where it's the doom mongering. There are certain podcasts that are too huge, where I'm not going to mention names, where people just go on and they just go, oh, there's going to be a revolution in America, and then there's a collective spate of mutual masturbation where they all talk about how doomed everything is. I think the reality is that conditions are never optimal. You're always going to have challenges. You're always going to have things that are going well. I think this is a tough moment, but I believe and I hope that we can turn it around, because the vast majority of people want it to turn around. It's just this small minority. But I think that people are starting to become awake. I think that people are realizing that this is unsustainable and that we can't carry on like this, and that you need to start having open and honest conversations. And I think the old tropes and the old weapons that people use of sexist, racist, transphobic, which, let's be fair, a lot of the times, not all of the time, but a lot of the times are merely tools used to shut down a conversation, are no longer working. You can only use the word racist so many times before people go, dude, that doesn't mean anything. Far right doesn't mean anything, which actually is a very dangerous place to be in, because there are racists and there is a very, very tiny percentage of people who are still far right.
Yeah.
And those words matter and they're important. But I think that tool of getting people to be silenced and shut them down, I don't think that's working anymore. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the doomsayers, I guess, it's only going to get worse. Is a common in frames like, well, if you think that way, then yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But another Gandhi quote that I really like is, every revolution begins with a single act of defiance.
Yeah.
Right. That's like why saying no, and then saying no is the first part, and then taking responsibility for the surroundings are the second part. Right?
Yeah.
It's like if the government, the state, or powerful forces of any kind, corporate or otherwise, come around and nobody has their hand out, they don't have any power there, right?
Yeah.
So what I try to tell people all the time is solve problems before those assholes get there.
Yeah.
If your neighbor needs help them, right?
Yeah.
And don't let anyone outside your community or outside your family come between you and somebody in your community or your family. That is retarded.
Yeah.
To let some jackass on TV split you and your buddy up is fucking retarded, especially over shit that doesn't affect you. Now, I'm sympathetic to human life in general, especially innocent human life. And what's happening in the Middle East sucks. What happens in Israel and Gaza sucks. But that should have no bearing on your personal relationships with people in the United States of America. That is fucking retarded that you would even allow that to happen. I mean, what the fuck, man? Like, this dude's setting himself on fire. You were a U.S. service member. You signed a document swearing your oath of allegiance to our country, not to some other assholes. You know what I mean? And by the way, whatever you think about Israel or Gaza or Hamas or Hezbollah or Iran or anybody else, it is perfectly reasonable not to take a side in a fight between two assholes sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes you can just say, yeah, not my fight. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I was doing a routine on this, which actually saw me get booed in this comedy club.
Of course, if you could pull off an Israel-Palestine joke right now, you're doing good work, I think.
Yeah. And basically the premise of it is, you know, why do we have to pick a side on everything? Why can I be non-binary when it comes to my gender, but not when it comes to, you know, the Israel-Palestine? Why can't I be Middle Eastern fluid? You know, and the people got so angry.
Where was this?
This was in a comedy club. I don't want to mention it because it's a great comedy club, and it was just like the group of people at the time. But it was a new material night, so people came along, and that was like a bit that I was trying to work out. And people got so angry, and I'm going, my grandfather is from Lebanon. So I could say, oh, I've got a horse in this race, which I don't have a horse in the race. But people feel that they need to get involved in every single thing. I need to be pro-Ukraine. I need to be pro-Palestine. I need to be pro this. I need to be anti this. I go, or maybe a lot of these issues are incredibly complex. And in order for you to be able to understand them, you need to take some time to read about them and to do some work. And as a result of that, then you're going to come to a position. But here's the thing. I guarantee you, your position will probably be very nuanced. And that is far, far more difficult than putting a Palestine flag in your bio on your Instagram.
Yeah.
Or for chanting from the river to the sea. Because then you have to admit that actually Hamas are not good guys.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought that we would be in that boat? Because it never happened with Al Qaeda, really.
No.
There was never a debate in the early 2000s like we got to stop bombing fucking Afghanistan because Al Qaeda is, you know, I mean, they're people too. Like, no, we just wanted to fucking slaughter everybody back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I think this is all based on what culture values, social currency specifically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how is it that you obtain social currency? It used to come from being an honorable person, being a good man, a good father, a hard worker, someone who helps their neighbor, someone who upholds the standards, things like that. Now it's whether or not you hold the right political or social positions, which, by the way, cost you nothing.
Yeah.
It costs you nothing at all. And you have no fucking effect on those things either, right? So it is a completely net zero effort.
Yeah.
It's no effort at all, and there's no consequence from the effort. But you still get the same social currency and the same dopamine hit that you would have normally from actually doing something. And that's why no one fucking does anything for real anymore. We've completely lost the relationship between effort and outcome. And we wonder why this next generation and a half ahead of us has no sense of ownership over their country, or no sense of purpose or duty, and no sense of looking beyond the self, right? Because they've maybe even tried to do that. Their version of looking beyond the self now is to put something in their fucking bio or go protest or something like that. Like, no, make the world a better place for people. Protesting doesn't do shit, in my opinion. I think it's retarded. I think it's a complete waste of time, but unless it turns into something real. But it's like we have the level of effort all happens within our own head now. Yeah. And then we get the same amount of praise and social respect. Like we did this. We built this infrastructure, and now we're living in it.
You know, the thing that I find, and it's to touch on a previous point of yours, where people allow their relationships, their friendships, to be destroyed over these political issues. If you surround yourself with people who agree with everything that you think, and you refuse to countenance having a friend or a romantic relationship with somebody who thinks differently to you, you're a child. You're a literal child. You are pathetic. You're a pathetic individual and human being. Because what that means is that you are so weak, you can't even have a disagreement with someone.
In your own home, right? Or amongst your own friends. You can't, like, if you're not solid enough in your position, by the way, your position should be prove it. I feel like, because that's like the Socratic method is another one that we seem to have forgotten about, but that is the basis for all education, is the Socratic method, the basis of all science, the basis of all education. Yeah. If that's not your guidestone, then you're just lying to yourself, right? That's retarded. I mean, it's like you don't ever really know anything if you're like that.
And it becomes a religious belief.
Yeah.
Trans women are women. Well, okay, we'll prove it. Well, I'm not going to prove it because that's transphobic. Well, then you go, well, what am I meant to do with that? What am I meant to do with that?
Just start singing Every Sperm is Sacred, I guess, because that's the best parody of that particular version of religion. Yeah. It's funny how theater and comedy always are so far ahead of these issues, right? And I'm not trying to blow smoke up the industry's ass or anything like that, but it's always been amazing to me that people like Chappelle and South Park were years ahead of this. Mm-hmm. People like Monty Python were decades ahead of this stupid shit. And then how did Shakespeare stay alive? Like he wrote like play after play that was subversive to the state. Yeah. And it was wildly popular, right? Yeah. That's the role. That's why the attacks that were going on, anti-comedy, particularly towards Rogan, but a lot of other people, were so nefarious, because people in power know the power that that the industry has, right? That's why they work so hard to capture Hollywood.
Yeah, and it's, when you saw Joe Biden coming out and talking about Rogan.
Yeah, the president of the United States is talking about Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
like get the fuck out of here. Dude.
Go, number one, have you not got something better to do with your time? And I love Joe, but to talk about a podcaster and a comedian, come on, really? With all the problems in America, with the fentanyl crisis, and you're talking about a podcaster? It just shows that, number one, that they're incredibly unserious. And number two, that they see him as a threat. They see him as a legitimate threat. That he will have people on, some of whom I disagree with, some of whom I agree with, to talk about things. And you go, this is worthy of comment from the President of the United States. This isn't serious.
No, we're not a serious culture anymore.
This is clown world. I know it's an overused term, but that is clown world.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we're just not a serious culture anymore. And the British have dealt with this more than the U.S. I guess the U.S. is dealing with it rather more now than they ever have before. But the attack on culture generally, the colonizer idea, right? Like, well, it's not okay just to be British, right? Which is interesting because all of the Indian and Pakistani people I know that live in England are fucking British.
Yeah.
As British as any fucking white dude that looks like you is, right? Yeah. But this latest generation, it's the same thing that's happening here in the States, are people that are moving here not for the opportunity necessarily. They're escaping something, but they're just coming to some place where they can get away with whatever the fuck they want to do. It's not about building better lives anymore, in my opinion, just based on what I'm seeing from these people, right?
I think as well, there will always be people who come over and, want to improve themselves and want to contribute. I think the problem is that when you have seeing the levels of immigration that we are currently absorbing into our nations, you are always going to get within that a subset of people who, quite frankly, should be nowhere near this country or my country. And I'll give you an example. I'm half Venezuelan. What is going on in Venezuela is a complete tragedy. One of my cousins is a journalist, literally had to flee for his life because he was criticizing the Maduro regime. He had to flee. He now lives in Uruguay. There are Venezuelans who are magnificent people who have had to flee for their lives in order to go to different countries to try and have some semblance of a normal life. But there are also some Venezuelans who come to the US, and I read about them, who create problems, rape, murder, kill, steal, etc. Those people have no business being in the United States of America. They have no business being anywhere, particularly America. And if you enter this country illegally, you are breaking the law, you are a criminal, you have no basis to be in that country. It is as simple as that. And you will talk to any person who came to America legitimately, pays their taxes, first generation immigrant, contributes to the society, and they will be far more hardline than any other person.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's weird, man. It's weird how a large subset of our population has dropped the assimilation requirement. That's always kind of been the requirement. You know what I mean? That if you come, like when in Rome, right? That saying is older than our country. Yeah. Jesus Christ. It's very bizarre to me, honestly. I don't. I guess it is just a religion, right? Because it's very. Somebody did a research study on this a while back. I think it might have been Nate Silver from 538 about how like the same within 2 percentage points, the same people support BLM and Palestine.
Yeah.
But there's no relationship between those two groups, right?
No.
None whatsoever. It's not the same alleged oppressor, not the same alleged victim. But the weirder one was how people that were in favor of mask mandates, lockdowns, and vax mandates were the same group of people that were in support of both of those two causes. Now, that is even farther apart. There is absolutely no relationship between authoritarian measures medical measures and fucking somebody being oppressed by the state. As a matter of fact, it's kind of the same issue, but you're on different sides of it, depending on what the issue is. But it's the same group of people that believe both of those things. That's a religion. You're just going down the bullet points. Well, I believe this because this is my group. Like, that's not a reason to fucking believe something, dude.
Well, and here's something that may upset the people listening and viewing this. That is the problem with ideology. I went to the National Conservative. I'm not on the right and I'm not a conservative. And I went to, but I like going to listen. I'm a curious person. I like going to listen to left-wing speakers, right-wing speakers, conservatives, because I think that's how you become a more well-rounded individual. You go, oh, I like this idea, I'll take this. I like this idea, I'll take that, and I'll put it together, and that becomes my worldview until somebody else, I get introduced to another idea, and I drop that or I find that, and that's how the process goes on. And I was sitting next to this member of parliament at dinner, and he goes to me, why are you conservative? And I go, I'm not. And he looks at me and he goes, because he's a conservative member of parliament. He's like, you're not conservative? I'm like, no. And he's like, but you're here. And I'm like, so why does that make me a conservative? And he's like, but why aren't you a conservative? And I go, because if I'm a conservative, then what that means is I have to download every aspect of that particular ideology into my brain, which then means that I then see the world through that particular prism, which then means that I give up my autonomy and my intellectual autonomy, and I no longer become a fully rounded individual because I'm analyzing the world through a particular system. That is not a way to go through life. And I would much rather, even though it's more difficult, be on my own and make up my own mind than download a woke ideology, a conservative ideology, a libertarian ideology, a left-wing ideology. I don't want any of it. I want to be able to see these systems in front of me and go, okay, so that works, that doesn't, and then I put it together. Because otherwise, all you're doing is you become an automaton to somebody else's way of viewing the world.